What's up, all my unconventional people out there? Welcome back. I got Tim Dodd with us, and Tim has been in the computer space since the beginning. Back in '95, he got a degree in computer science. So when it comes to the computer world and what's going on with AI, Tim has seen it all. And right now, he is working at SID Global Solutions, and we're going to chat about AI today and what Tim is doing in that space. And being that you started with a computer science degree in 1995, that wasn't a very popular degree back in the day. Could you even imagine we'd be where we're at right now?
Yeah, it was interesting. So obviously, I might be a little older than you, but when I was a kid in the 80s, that was when the PC kind of started getting into homes, right? So you had the mainframes and the big computers at the office. So when that happened, I read a book by Bill Gates and got interested in computers at kind of an early age. But we didn't have, like you could take a programming class or anything. So there was some limited exposure that I had through like a Boy Scouts or through camps, but nothing like it is now in a high school. And I actually went for computer engineering and wasn't good at math, but was also more passionate about programming, so switched to computer science. So I graduated in 2000, and yeah, that was right when the internet started hitting, right? So the internet came out when I was a junior, senior in high school. Then you had the internet when you were in college. You're playing, video games with your friends in the dorms and all that. But then, yeah, you had the .com, so it just took off right when I was graduating, which was awesome.
I didn't know Bill Gates wrote a book. Was it a long book, short book? I wasn't aware.
Um, yeah, there was a couple of them, but
You think he
I'll
actually
tell
wrote
you.
them?
Yeah, let me tell you the book. There was some other called The Road Ahead.
The Road Ahead by Bill Gates.
It was that was one of the first books that inspired me to get into computers. Published in November of 1995.
Hmm. I didn't know he wrote books, but seems like he does a little bit of everything.
Yeah, so it was just really like cool about the vision of where he saw technology going and stuff like that. So it
Mhm.
was cool.
How did you get interested in this? Because
Mhm.
like you said, no one even had a computer until you were in high school. But I guess anything new, people like kind of frown upon in the beginning because it's all new. So you were definitely an early adopter. What was it about computer science that sucked you in to be in this space for the last almost
Yeah,
30?
so I think as a kid, I was, at least before I went to college for engineering, I thought I was pretty good at math, but I didn't necessarily want to be like a math teacher or something like that. And I talked to my guidance counselor, and they were like, well, you can go, really as a fairly good student, you could be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. That were really kind of the only three options. And I thought engineering seemed to be good. It was more applying things than it was like just doing R&D and just being, a scientist where you had to go get a PhD. I was like, you could graduate in 4 years, make a good amount of money, do things that are logical and things like that seem to be interesting. And then you could build stuff. So, it wasn't just theoretical like science or math. It was like you could build something and you could see like when you were, a senior high school, people were building little websites. Like, I mean, it was simple stuff, but it was something you could show someone as a tangible thing that you built. So I thought that was pretty exciting.
Sweet. So you went from engineering to computer science, then you got out of school. What was that like finding a job in the computer space? Because nowadays
Mhm.
it's in demand, but back then I'm sure it was a little bit more challenging because the internet was new and you probably had to pull out a newspaper still to find a job.
Yeah, so this will tailor into our later conversation around AI, but I started out in computer science. My sophomore year, I was really struggling with engineering, and I said, look, I'm going to take all the classes that I'm interested in. So I took a lot of like junior, senior level computer science classes. And so as a sophomore, I interned for the state of Delaware and got to do really basic search engines. So at the time, it was like Netscape had the search engine that you could build for different state agencies. So I did that. It wasn't really complicated from a programming perspective, but it allowed you to understand like the business and like what's the value to a citizen. And then my junior, senior year, I built an actual application that went production. So I was able to see all of that. So then when I graduated, it was a lot easier because I had internship experience building things. And so I ended up picking kind of, it wasn't really a startup. It was more like an agency that built websites for like big pharmaceutical companies. So I built like these e-cards for Tylenol. A lot of these big pharmaceuticals were just getting into basic web stuff.
Like the e-cards people used to email to each other.
Yeah.
Oh man, those things are everyone was sending those.
Yeah. So I built the first one for Tylenol, which was like a cool brand. Like everyone knew like, Tylenol was a pain medicine. So, but you actually had something that you did and built. So that was my first forte. I just thought it was a cool kind of startup-y feel to the company and did that. So that was my first really full-time job as a programmer. Did that for a little bit, went to work for the University of Delaware where I went to college, then went to work for a consulting company, and then I was taking MBA classes and then kind of transitioned into more of a sales role. But from a
What were you,
sales perspective,
what were you building for like the state of Delaware? Like what were you helping out with there, like their system wise? Because um, that that's like something super important now. That's how they know exactly where to mail you tickets and find you.
yeah. So because we were interns, we named our software called Oops, OOPS, and it was the overweight and oversized permit system. So what it allowed you to do as a truck driver would be to figure out like how much tolls you were going to pay if you were traveling down the interstate. And so we built all the back end logic of how to calculate those and all that stuff. And then you could go onto a website, right? So within the first 10 years really of the public facing internet, these truck drivers could go in and figure out, how much would I pay for my tolls when I was going through the state of Delaware. And then the company that I worked for right after the University of Delaware, 10 years later, that system was still there. Now, none of my code was still there, but they actually went to an RFP and like, it finally like decades later has been replaced, the original thing that we built. So it was kind of cool. Like this little junior, senior year project that I did as an intern really stuck around for like 10 years.
How long did it take you to write that code? Was it all an all summer job?
Yeah, so I worked all summer in June or in this junior and then part-time in the summer or part-time in the fall and we had a winter session. So did all that to get it launched. So it was a cool project. It was a multi-year project for the rest of the Dodd team and Department of Technology.
So as interns, you basically set the foundation for this entire system for the state of Delaware, and they just trusted you to do it.
Pretty much.
What was that like? Were you all scared or excitement? Like everything? Like, did you have like multiple computers? Just like I think I'd like to like get a picture of that.
So without getting into too much detail, I think I believe the person's retired now, but I think at the time there was a big change. So if you are familiar with COBOL and a lot of these legacy, mainframe systems, which they still have today, that was a very linear like programming language. So we were doing object-oriented programming using Java. So a lot of the old state employees were having a really hard time understanding how object-oriented programming worked. So I actually had the opportunity to help teach some of the programmers on how to write Java, which was kind of cool as an intern. You were able to teach people. And then we were able to work directly with like the end client at the state and say, tell us your screen flow and all that. And then we had really, really good programmers behind the scenes that were building a lot of the really complex things, but then we would be able to implement that. So like with the screens, you could look at the old mainframe, grab the data, bring it in. We were able to build a lot of the front end user interfaces. So it was really cool. Like we got to teach some people that were not as advanced as us, but then we also worked with some guys that are actually still at the state today that are just brilliant at what they do, and you were able to learn from them. So, if you're looking at an internship, bless you, by the way,
Thank you.
getting the opportunity to work along a team that you actually send something into production is like an amazing experience as an intern. So,
When you were working, what were the more tenured programmers like? Because this was still a very new concept.
yeah, so I mean, there were like architects there that had been there for, probably 20, 30 years. right, that really understood and stayed up on technology. But, my manager at the time, who now is like head of architecture, he was I would say early 30s, but like really, really solid, like manager and mentor and helping you figure that out. But a lot of the programmers there were there for 15, 20 years. So they were, very familiar with COBOL. They were very knowledgeable of the use cases and like the workflows and what need to happen and how you get stuff done internally. But, we were really the first group of people outside of like, I would say like some consultants that they had that really were building a Java-based project. And so we had a whole group of people that we call Java Jail that all sat down. We were all interns building out, some of the first Java.
Is COBOL a language?
Yeah, it's an old
Is it
language
a
that
language
mainframes use.
now? Are they still using COBOL?
Yeah, there's COBOL.net. And then a lot of companies will convert it into modern language. So there's a lot of AI tools that'll help you convert from legacy COBOL to modern
Is
software.
COBOL kind of like Latin, and then let's just say like new computer programming would be like English, which is
Yeah.
derived from Latin. So COBOL is like the founding language, one of them.
Yeah. So there was C programming, which was really what like C++ and
Oh, I
object
hate C++.
oriented. Yeah. So, but it was really cool. Like you got to learn like all the legacy stuff and then, yeah, how to make that more modern. So,
How important is it to like have an understanding of the like basically the founding languages of like understanding how all the programming works now?
I mean, I don't think it's super important, but a lot of times as a business professional, you're going to come in and have to deal with legacy stuff.
Hmm.
So being able to figure that out or at least navigate your way around it, I think is important. Or if, like you want a legacy skill that, will get you a job, right? I mean, some of these things are still going to be around 10, 20 years from now. So if you really like that programming style, like there's a lot of COBOL and a lot of mainframes that are probably still going to be around the next 10, 20 years. So I don't think that code is dying.
Right.
So, but the people that are familiar with it are retiring. So there are a subset of programmers that are like, hey, if I go learn this, then I'll have a job in a skill that's still around, even though it's not the most modern language. But yeah, I think it's just understanding it and being able to adapt your language. But for me, it's all about understanding the basic and core fundamentals of programming and using now tools like AI to enhance your workflow. So it's really interesting. When I was a programmer, we had to write everything from scratch as a kid. And then as soon as you go into the like workforce, there's all these tools that did a lot of that for you, but you still need to understand the fundamentals and the basics. Even though you had tools like today that might write the AI for you, you still need to understand what that is. So doing the hard work and the tedious coding without the tools and without AI are going to make you a better programmer once you start using the tools in AI.
Yeah, because like I see people using ChatGPT to write code or programs. How how is using that helpful? And but it sounds like you still need to know the foundation in order to work around that.
Yeah, so I'm working on a talk that I'll give in a couple of weeks around this. So a lot of the programmers, it's like if you're going out and learning how to bake bread, like at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to make flour from scratch, right? You can go out and buy store-bought flour. You could probably, buy a lot of these ingredients off the shelf. But I think if you're truly going to be a master baker, like you need to start with the original grain and then like make the flour and then make the bread. But 90% of the time, probably 99% of the time, you're going to buy flour from the store. So for me to be a solid programmer, like understanding the really basics and all the inner workings of the basic steps are important. But now there's so many tools. So if you don't understand the fundamentals and like AI makes up an answer for you, that may be a correct way, but not the best way, and you don't understand what happened and how it got to that point, you could be just deploying code that isn't the best solution for the problem that you're trying to solve. So understanding those fundamentals and seeing what the AI is generating for you and using your understanding of programming to make sure that this is the right approach that was generated, I think is valuable. but it does accelerate a lot of your software development, your testing, your go-to-market on whatever you're building. So
That reminds me of like a video I was watching about someone who was doing like a skit about a programming team. And they're like, we need to rewrite the code. And then like, who wants to rewrite the code? And like one person raised their hand and he like gets in there. He's like, who wrote this code? And then there's like a flashback. He's like, oh, I wrote this code. And it was like all messed up because like he tried to take like certain shortcuts. And they're like, he got back to the team meeting and they're like, did you figure out who wrote the code? And he was like, that person's way gone. They left a
yeah.
long time ago.
And if they don't document the code and all that stuff, like you're just so yeah. So there's a lot of really good practices that you're gonna learn over time. But I mean, I remember I wrote one piece of code, I couldn't get it to work, and my buddy just wrote it from scratch. He's like, use this, and it worked. So I have no idea why my code wasn't working, but like he gave me that piece. So
Yeah, it's almost an art form.
yep.
Like you could write the same code probably 1,000 different ways and it would still work. However, how does the efficiency of the code ensure things don't happen like I guess not too long ago the whole CrowdStrike thing happened and planes couldn't get off the ground because of something.
Yeah, so I think a lot of is automation of your testing and like the test scenarios that you have, right? So in the crowd stake, and I don't know like the exact details of the root cause analysis, but my general understanding is whatever they did, they didn't properly test that, or maybe a new use case that they didn't expect happened, right? So having really good test cases, and that's where I think AI can help you. Like, are there test cases that I'm not thinking of, right? And have AI evaluate, are there use cases that you should be considering in your test cases? So there's a lot of power because a lot of times you get tunnel vision as a programmer and you're not thinking about the what if scenarios, and AI can help you potentially figure those out and then add those test cases to your environment.
Yeah, we had one programmer on here and he was like, the one thing we didn't account for was what if the cleaning team unplugged the computers? That wasn't in their manual for how to work their program. They're like, we had to call someone to like go plug it back in, and we didn't account for that. And with AI and everything, how is that translating to what you're doing now, and what's the positive effect it's going to have on our society that people like me probably don't know about?
Yeah, so I mean, as an individual, contributor, whether you're a programmer or you're just a regular office person that isn't, writing code on your day-to-day life, there's a lot of automation that, a lot of us have taken for granted and making our life easier. And AI is just making that much more powerful. So, people probably are familiar with ChatGPT. Like you can go in there and ask it to write emails for you. You can ask it for insights, like how do I prep for a meeting? How do I prep for an interview? Like all of those things are really, really powerful just to get you thinking, like what questions should I be asking that I'm not aware of? But when you dig deeper, it's not simple like, okay, what if I want to build my own language model around, what jobs make sense for me, right? So now I could go out and query the internet and see like what jobs make sense based on my resume or my background. Right. So in business, it's the same way. Like it's not just simple asking basic questions. Now you can take all the data that you have within the organization and get unique insights in there that maybe you hadn't even asked. So, one of the organizations I'm talking to, the CIO is like, I want it to ask me questions that I hadn't even thought about to ask. Right. So it's a very common use case with all this data that you've been collecting. Are there questions that you're not even thinking about asking? We had another one where they were doing labor contracts, and like for the lawyers, they would have to go through all of the previous labor contracts to make sure this new like sentence in the agreement doesn't conflict with anything else that they had done. All of that initial homework now can be done by AI. Like you still need a lawyer to validate and make sure it makes sense, but like you can do a lot of research and a lot of homework and then check your homework after the AI is giving you that initial summary of things to do.
Yeah, I look at it as what AI is helping with. It's taking out basic things that you'd have to go to an expert for to validate, and it can validate like the basic things to some degree, but there are certain things you still need that human element. Have you figured out like what that balance is in terms of being able to, not fully rely on AI, but like what's that good balance that you've been seeing in the computer world?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of risk, right? So obviously, if you're a doctor and you're dealing with like cancer and you want to scan those, those the diagnostic, like there's a lot of human error, that like potentially happens. Doctors or the people that are screening the x-rays or whatever get sleepy, they're tired, they're human, they make mistakes. So using AI to do that initial homework is great. Like it's a really, really good first case, get that done. But you still, as the doctor, need to go in there and double check that and make sure that that's correct. But then there's a lot of simple stuff. Like if I sent you an email and it wasn't perfect, unless it's a really, really bad email from AI, like you're not gonna probably fire me over the email. So drafting emails is a really good technique. But hey, if I'm going outside of the organization for a sales email, or this is going to an executive, like, yeah, I probably want to, double check the email before I send it. So most people using AI are just crafting the email and automatically sending it are going to screw up, but it's probably not going to like in their career if they do it. But again, if it's an executive outside your organization, like maybe you reread the email before it does it for you. So I think it's a matter of what the risk versus reward is. If it's simple research and just gives you a starting point, so you don't have to read the whole, earnings call of a customer, that's great. You missed something, you can find that out on the call of the customer, right? So, but having the AI help you get some unique insights in the earnings call, and it took you 30 seconds to do it versus an hour, like that's probably a good use of your time.
Yeah, I've used it to analyze data and be like, hey, like here's the data, tell me what the average is, the high, the low, give me a summary. So it definitely helps with certain things. Now there's like a paid version and the free version. What's the difference between like the paid version and the free version with just like any of these chat?
I just think the quality is gonna be better. So if you can't afford it, then obviously the free
Okay.
version is better.
Kind of like
But
buying like Whole Foods versus processed foods.
yeah, but then even like the volume of things that you can do on it, all those things go up. So if you're really trying to do serious number crunching, or you have a team that you all want to share it, like you can create a persona of like, of your organization, of questions that you want to ask it. You can train that model. Like there's a lot of stuff you can do, and then you share it across the team. Like you can't do those things in the free version.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so for me, I have a whole different perspective on tools. Like I can use AI in my PowerPoint slide. I can, a lot of this AI functionality is built into the tools that you have. So it's not as simple as just looking at a free version of ChatGPT. It's, are there versions of your Microsoft Word or your tools that you use in a business today that have AI capability, and that's already baked in? Can you leverage that and get more productivity out of your day?
Sounds like using at least the free version's pretty much a must-have, and if you're not using it, you're gonna quickly fall behind.
Yeah, so I was reading a book the other weekend, and they looked at every industrial revolution or every major leap, and every major revolution involved more jobs at the end, right? So just because you're doing things manually in the manufacturing plant, you if you weren't able to adapt, you may likely be, get like laid off or whatever. But after that industrial revolution happened, there was more jobs in there than there were before. So even with AI, if you don't adapt to it, yeah, you might fall on the wayside, depending on what career you have. Like you may be able to get replaced by AI, but everyone that's adopted AI is probably going to have more job opportunities. So I think there's more risk to you not to learn AI than there's a risk of you not, or not having a job after the AI revolution.
Yeah, seems like the last big boom was the internet and just the ability to be able to share information, such as we're on a podcast right now. I found you through the internet. I sent you a link, and we're here.
Yep.
Versus back in the day, I'd have to have someone call you. They'd have to go through a secretary. They might get through the secretary. You may be there, you may not. So it definitely makes life a lot simpler. And I mean, that's why people love Amazon. I could go on something, and if I'm in a major city, there's a good chance it could show up at my door before I go to sleep.
Yeah, but look at how many delivery drivers. I mean, there's still a lot of opportunity that's created by the Amazon revolution. So even using automation or AI, like, net, you're still creating more jobs and more opportunity for yourself. And you're able to use your brain more, hopefully, in the next phase than doing a lot of the mundane tasks that AI is doing for you. And it's enhancing your ability to do the more powerful uses of your brain. There's, and depending, like, so when I was in computer science, I think AI started in like the 70s, or, I had a big group, and then early 40s, I guess, was really when it maybe officially started. But in the 2000s, the level of work that I could do with an AI was very, very basic, but it helped do stuff, right, at some level. Now it's way more powerful. So the decisions that I can make as an individual in my role is way better than it was before AI. And I'm getting to do more interesting work, and I'm not doing the tedious stuff that I don't like.
Yeah, I was like watching an interview the other day with Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates, and they were poking fun at Mr. Gates because when I guess he gave out the encyclopedia for free on Microsoft, and Warren and Charlie Munger at Berkshire, they owned an encyclopedia company that was making like $50 million a year at one point. They're like, well, Bill got rid of that for us with his innovation. So the innovation to be able to share information at a lower cost definitely helps move the progress of society forward. And I mean, you've been in the cloud space, and we had a guest on here who was talking about how Amazon, when they came out the cloud, they were just letting people use it for free. Talk to us about what's going on there.
Sure. So originally, Amazon was a bookseller, right? Online. That's what most people knew it early days. So what they found is they were building out this computing platform, that had a lot of unused resources. So they started selling it to other companies and basically renting their processing power, their storage, all that stuff. Um, so there's a great example. I was talking to a CIO, and the CIO was getting dinged by the CFO for how much books that they were buying from Amazon. And he was really confused. He's like, we're not buying this many books, but for the non-technical person at the time, that's all they knew Amazon did. So he was just consuming processing power. So if you fast forward now with the AI revolution and the sheer amount of data that you want to analyze, most organizations, even if they didn't need cloud computing before, if they want to analyze their data, they're going to need cloud computing now to do that, right? So that's where cloud is really going to boom, is allowing you to upload all your data, put it in like a data lake, and then analyze that and get the unique insight. So, ask me questions that I don't know. Like now, the regular line employee, the executive, can go into these systems and get unique insights for their specific role in the organization to understand the information that they have in front of them to make educated decisions. So
Right.
that is where cloud computing, in my opinion, is really driving based on the AI revolution today.
Does every small business and big business have access to use these cloud tools to start building out? It sounds like it's like a way to like build, like if you have a company and you're looking to call it McDonald's everything, because McDonald's is very good at making the same hamburger everywhere. It's not the best hamburger, but they're consistent across what they do. Same with like Chick-fil-A. Is that like what the cloud is? It can allow people to put in these systems. So if I'm working in California and you're in New York, you can just like go into a chat and then you can see like exactly what a system is without talking with someone, or am I
Yeah.
misunderstanding?
So right now, I think the easy example for a small business is like QuickBooks, right? So
Right.
you can log in as a software as a service. That software isn't on your computer. So if your laptop dies or someone within your organization needs to get access to QuickBooks, it's all in the cloud, right? So very powerful, allows organizations to work really well. They don't need to like build out all this infrastructure in their office or run their whole business on their laptop, and there's no backup, there's no disaster recovery, there's no security. All that stuff is covered by these software as a service companies. But now, because of the chatbots that are coming, so the program that I first did as an intern was creating a search engine for the Department of Transportation's website. and I could go in there just like Google and search it. Well, now there's a chatbot that you can do the same thing. So sure, I could sit there and go all over the web and try to find the right answer. But now if I go into Google and ask like, how do I renew my driver's license? Google will give you a response. So I don't need to go and click to that website and scroll down and find it all. You can do the same thing now in these internal organizations. So you call into the Department of Motor Vehicle and you have a specific question. Now you can get authenticated. Instead of talking to a live human, you can talk to a chatbot. If it's frustrating to you or it's complicated or you feel better, sure, you can still talk to a human. But a lot of us are doing this for our bank statements. Like, we're not one to talk to a human. If we need to, sure, but most of the time you don't want to. And then a lot of people that are in the call centers, they want to help the customer, right? Like generally these people are in the customer service industry because they want to help people. So answering stupid questions or easy questions, like that's not a good use of their time. Trying to really dig into an issue that a customer's struggling with that they can solve, like that's a much better use of their time.
And with the cloud computing, does that have any relation to like quantum computing? I've been reading about that for like, seems like forever, but it hasn't really hit the main stage.
Yeah, so quantum computing is just a different processing power. So really that's meant for like research and development where you have a task that you want to break that task into really small chunks and then distribute that across a lot of computers to like go analyze that data. So there's definitely parallels of quantum computing and use cases, but I would still say that's mostly like R&D. Like you're not going in your QuickBooks having to use quantum computing to calculate your profit loss report.
Got it. And how is all this related to what you're doing now? And like, what's the problem that you're solving that you're most excited about right now?
Yeah, so I think for me, there's a couple. One is like, how do I use data to make decisions, right? So whether I'm an executive, I'm a line worker, or in between, are there ways that I can go in with a chat bot or create reports that give me unique insights that allow me to make better decisions? I think that's where the AI is really the most powerful. But the thing that most people are familiar with is the chat bot. So I go to my bank and I'm like, what's my balance? And if I don't ask the question the right way, whether I call in or I log into a chat, I can't get the answer. So with AI, you can do it in regular language, just like you and I are talking, and we can have a conversation with the chatbot to get a lot of the simple things answered for us without having to interface with a customer service person.
So with these AI tools, could they literally like replace most of the C-suite and take like emotion out of it? Or is it other departments that you feel like would be replaced and then expanded upon?
So I think there was a use case where I think it was a Japanese company hired an AI a CEO.
Yeah.
So if your like job is just to make decisions based on the data that you have as an executive, yeah, then there is potentially to replace a lot of that. But your job as a CEO is to not only make this tactical or strategic decisions, it's to provide the vision, lead the company, be the company's cheerleader, interact with your largest, most valuable customers. Like there's a lot of things the C-suite still needs to do that an AI tool isn't going to replace. This is just going to enhance them. I think the more bigger risk is like I'm an accounts payable person. I'm an executive assistant. I'm doing a lot of iterative, repeatable tasks at high volume where automation tools maybe can solve a lot of those problems, but now adding AI on top of that makes those jobs a lot less needed, right? So the customer service rep, like in a lot of organizations, there's a lot of really complex customers that are unhappy that need extra help. So if you could reduce the call volume of the simple things, then those reps could be focused on helping the customers with a more challenging, more difficult, more complex tasks that probably involve coordinating across the organization, helping get buy-in to solve the customer's problem. All those things like are still very much needed.
Yeah, I've been implementing like as much as I can to automate systems because like people ask like as a financial professional, like, well, how many clients do you have? And like I tell them like, well, how do you manage all that? I was like, well, I pull out a computer, I film a video, I edit the video, I send the same message to every single person. So they're getting the exact same summary, they're getting the exact same info, they're getting the exact same disclosures or things to be aware of. And as long as I have their phone number and or email address, I'm getting the same message out to every single person so that people are only calling me when they have a problem that needs to be solved, or maybe they need some money. And that's the goal. I want to help and solve problems. So I'm not on like calls where people need help with password resets, which is something a link could solve, like you said. And that way the business owners and the people in the professional world are working on the, highest value activities and assisting their customers and clients as much as humanly possible. What else
Yeah.
are you currently doing now that's got you excited?
Yeah, I mean, so right now I've just been having a lot of these like executive conversations of, this is what they're trying to solve from a corporate goal perspective or a challenge they see in their business, and just helping them translate that into use cases. And then from a technology perspective, this is how we can help them. So, we're talking to a couple organizations that deal in the criminal justice system, right? How do you get insights for a parole officer on how to best help the person so that they can be successful when they get released from prison? How can you help the executives of that agency figure out where to spend the money the right way? And it can be very personalized now, right? Like you may have a GED and I don't have a GED, and I can see from the data that if Tim gets a GED, he's going to be less likely to go back to prison. So now I can give that parolee custom tailored plan to help them be successful. But I can only do that if we analyze the data and see what's working across the entire population, and then give you a custom message. So like if you're a financial advisor and you know that Tim wants to retire at a certain age, he has a certain risk tolerance, like, bless you. Imagine sending a custom thing, but maybe my income as a salesperson is different. I have spikes and valleys. So even if my age risk tolerance is the same as somebody else that's a flat, salaried worker, like you could send out these custom tailored reports based on the insights that you've gathered from these people. And so then you're just
Just
in a
like
much.
if I go to a restaurant and like let's just say I have like a barcode on my wrist and I like scan the barcode on my wrist, they'd be like, oh, Josh is allergic to shellfish and he's has a sodium sensitivity. The waiter could literally be like, hey, based on your DNA that they get, these are the sort of meals I would recommend. And that's what you were saying, like with the custom tailored plans based on each individual person.
Yeah, so like I went to an event where like they have these like robot like bartenders. So you write in plain English like what type of drink did you want, and then it would tell the bartender these are the ingredients, this is the type of drink that you should make for that person.
What'd you order?
Uh, I don't remember. Yeah, I don't
What did you
remember.
tell the bartender?
I just said I wanted like a sweet, I don't know, like a sweet non-alcoholic drink, and it like created it for you,
Hmm.
right? So if I go into a restaurant, now there's some privacy issues, but in an ideal world where you weren't worried about privacy, they could scan your face, they could know what your like your ordering is, they could know what type of water you want when you sit down. There's a lot if you don't deal with the privacy issues. But from a waiter perspective, they're tracking you if you sign up for the frequent diner plan or whatever. But yeah, like create a custom drink, like that's a unique thing that before it was a back and forth between the bartender and you trying to guess like what makes sense.
Totally. Well, do you feel like that might take some of the art out of it a little bit, like the human interaction piece? Like maybe some people argue like, hey, it takes out like that relationship piece when it comes to like that hospitality service. What would be like your argument that against?
Well, so I think so it was an interesting experiment because I think that there was, like this was a one-time event and there was a lot of people going in, right? And so if you've got high volume where you're just trying to push through orders and give them a unique experience, then I think that's good. Now, if you're at a very high-end, high-touch dining establishment, like that might not work. But for McDonald's or these low end where people just want to come in and out quickly, yeah, I think that's a pretty good pretty good alternative.
Yeah, especially in the service industry, there's typically a lot of turnover.
Yep.
Though having a robot that can't leave eliminates that problem as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot you could go into every industry, but like, where can AI make your life better? But I think the human to human interaction, the lack of emotion from an AI, all those things are just not there.
Yeah, including greed or having certain incentives to do certain things. The AI doesn't really have that. It's just like spitting out an answer. I guess the fear of some people is it could, I guess, learn to do those sort of things to incentivize itself. Is there any like watchdogs on AI or like precautions that have been putting in place to make sure the Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't show up and become the Terminator?
So I think from a military perspective, I think there will be a point in the future where they will, allow them to make their own autonomous decisions. But right now, I don't believe that the military is there yet for that. But there are like AI working groups across, the government and industry. Like Google's famous, catchphrase early on in their existence was "Do no evil," right? And then they abandoned that. But there's still a lot of pressure from Google to do the right thing and make sure, like, if I give you answers on google.com, that it's backed up with referenceable websites where the data comes from, so it's not hallucinating. Like, there are instances where the organizations are trying to make this done right. But yeah, it's gonna be a wild world, man, if they start letting drones just make autonomous decisions. But I think we're decades off from that at the moment. So
Yeah. If AI shows up, I want the Terminator. I want the Arnold Schwarzenegger and Terminator 2, the good one, to show up to help us all out. And Tim, you were fantastic. Anyone that needs help with their company putting AI systems in place, whether you're an executive or a small business owner like me, hit Tim up, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye, everyone.